Welcome to AFlame Ministry on TV. And my guest today is Robyn McTague, a master holistic healer, best-selling author, and teacher and creator of A Life of Choice Coaching. Robyn has experienced breast cancer and hepatitis C, along with other challenges, but she has a mission, and it is to assist others in their healing journeys in a safe, practical, and gentle way. Robyn, welcome to AFlame Ministry.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a great pleasure to have you here. Uh, let's start with something very basic. What is motivation?
Well, it's interesting because we used to have this idea that there was internal and external motivation, and that's actually been found to not be true. So all motivation is internal because if you think about it, can we actually make anyone do anything? Not really.
Not really.
So I like to equate it very simply as motivation equals energy. And that's kind of the simplest way to even think about it.
Motivation equals energy. When we're not motivated, we really don't have a whole lot of energy, do we?
No.
No. So where does this energy, this motivation come from? You say it's internal, but how do we get it?
It actually comes from a couple of different areas, and we don't kind of invent it, we kind of more detect it. So we have ways that we look at our past, the ways we look at our future, and the way we look at the present that we're in. So by combining those things, they actually help us to find out what motivates us. So for example, the process that I use helps us to look at our personality, which is kind of more fixed, and then how we look at the past and the future, which changes over time. If you think about yourself even 10 years ago, what motivated you then is different now. So this is one of the things with motivation is that all of our experiences and how we view things come together to see what do we want in our life.
What do we want? That's a big question, and it's one that I don't know about you, but at times I've had a hard time answering for myself. So if I would think that when we have a hard time answering that question, it's kind of hard to be motivated.
Very much so. And sometimes we can have pieces of ourselves that conflict. So if I want to do something and I'm high growth and like to make decisions like that, that part of me wants to move forward. And another part of me has more needs around safety, security, that's going to hold me back. So there can be times where, I want to step forward and then I step back and I'm not sure why that is.
So how can we figure out how to motivate ourselves?
So the process I use is an assessment tool called the motivational map. And we all have 9 dimensions of motivation, but how they're stacked, the intensity, how they're put together is different for each of us. So it actually helps us to make that invisible part of ourselves visible so we can see what are those things that drive our behavior. And our top 3 motivators account for about 60 to 70% of our behaviors.
Okay, so there's these 9 factors that go in, and there's 3 of them that are at the top. But how, your assessment would help us understand what those are. But you say these things change over time. So
we have the basic 9, and how they shift is, for example, if I'm starting out in my life and maybe I have more security needs, but as I get more confident in what I'm doing, maybe making more money or being more recognized or having mastery over something specific, like the expert part of ourselves, may come forward as we shift and grow and as our life changes.
Okay, so those parts of us can change. So why then do we sometimes feel like we're being pulled in all kinds of different directions?
Sometimes it can be that we have too many things that motivate us. So even though those top three account for some, if we have 5 or 6, then we're constantly wanting to do different things, or if there's a conflict between two of them. So for example, I love to do things and learn about things. So I'm the searcher, and part of me wants to make money. So it's like that searcher just wants to do it for the sake of doing it, but the builder wants the recognition or something that will help them to move forward in the life from a more of a monetary stance. So there may be that push pull of why am I doing it? I want to do it, but there's something that's stopping me, or I'm constantly reevaluating what's important about it.
Well, I know that sometimes I feel like this is important, but also this is important to me. And they are not necessarily two things that are um, go together real easily. And it may be facets of my ministry, like it's important to go out and visit people. No, but it's also important to sit in and learn things and to get my sermon prepared. For people in ministry, those could be two big pushes and pulls. How does that fit in with the motivation map and what you're talking about?
So, what it helps us to do is actually figure out, okay, what is that important thing? And are there parts of that that maybe I can let go of? So, for example, one of my motivators really doesn't like the paperwork. So I know that maybe that's something I need to do, or maybe I can get some support in that, or I can use some different techniques to help me to feel more satisfied in that area. So maybe it's a matter of sitting down and realizing this one, although it doesn't really motivate me, I can see a different angle and kind of reframe it and see how this one is helping that one. So if I get this part taken care of and realize I can get this done in a short time, then maybe it's the spirit part of me that wants that freedom, and reframing that actually completing something gives me more freedom rather than seeing it as restricting myself in my freedom.
Mm, okay, okay, I got it. Because I know for me, one of the things is kind of being disciplined enough to um, not complete things that I do, but to schedule things. Because so much of ministry is kind of in the moment at
Mm.
times. And, one phone call can just totally rearrange uh, the schedule of anybody who's in full-time ministry. And so, I mean, you got to be able to pick up and move and do something else. And I've gotten to the point where scheduling, it's not a favorite of mine. So how could I use this information to reframe something like that?
Yeah, so it's really important to know what does get you off your balance, your game, whatever it is for you, and seeing what strategies do I need to put in place. So for you, it might be, okay, I've taken that call. And as entrepreneurs, we have this happen all the time. We have to have that flexibility. So learning that, yes, I need to have some leeway in that schedule, but also that schedule helps me to make sure I get those things done. And then I feel more relaxed. I'm not feeling so stressed. So I'm putting in certain things in my calendar and adding buffers, for example.
Mm,
Or maybe it's having a bigger plan. Maybe I need to look at what are the kind of ebbs and flows. Is there certain times I can say I'm not available? Like doing some of those things that will give us that relaxing, that kind of breath to be able to actually do it and not feel like we're always behind on things, because then we get into the mindset of we're doing less and less, because then we're getting demotivated because those other things are not getting met. So it's really important to go with them as much as possible.
yeah, I like what you said, leaving some space for buffers, but also thinking about getting something accomplished and the feeling of accomplishment with that. And Yeah, it's true that one phone call can change things in ministry, but not everything's a five-alarm fire type of emergency. So, we have to be able to say, okay, yeah, this person needs some help or something like that, but can put that into a schedule. It's not
And there's,
an
yeah,
emergency.
and there's boundaries, right? If our friend is really strong, we're the type of person, which I'm sure is probably high in a lot of the people you work with, is they have that connection, right? Relationships take time, so they like to keep those relationships. It's really important for them, and
Mhm.
that's how they feel energized, is by keeping that. So to set a boundary can be really challenging sometimes around, I'm only available these times, right? Or, because people can kind of pull on our energy if we let them. And
Mhm.
if we, it doesn't have to be really harsh, right? And we have to kind of learn that. It's like, yes, this is the time where I'm available. And unless it's like you say, the five alarm, then
Mhm.
this is when we can chat.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's something we can do as individuals. Is there any way that this applies to a group, like to a committee or to even a larger group, like a whole community?
Mm-hmm. What I find is often we tend to like the same kind of people that we are. So often when we're looking for groups or to hire someone, we think we're really good at what we do. So someone just like us is going to be just as valuable.
Mhm.
But the thing is that if we don't have people with all of those different skills and motivations, certain things aren't going to get done. So, for example, if the friend, everyone's friends, it's like we're talking all the time and getting along great, but what actually gets done? We need a bit of the director who kind of has more control over things, the builder who's looking at the financial aspect of things, the star, which is recognition and getting yourself out there. So we need a balance. And we also need the defender, because if we're not looking at what the safety and security of the organization or the team is, then we can go off on all these tangents and spend too much or waste too much time and energy doing things.
What you're talking about, it's very similar to another assessment that I use called How to Fascinate, but it reminds me that you know diversity is a beautiful thing. And it's very important that we have all of these wonderful gifts that are part of us as a community of people to have this wonderful interplay. Um, I one of the analogies I love to use is you go out and walk in the woods, and most of the time there are a variety of trees there and a variety of animals, and um, it's not as haphazard as we think, that they're there to help each other, and they each have a particular role to play. And that's what I hear you saying, is that we each, it's like if you're going to do a building project, you need people who can envision something beautiful, but you need the people who have the detail orientation to actually make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's absolutely it. It's like that diversity and the strengths and that ability to bring in the parts that we can't.
Yeah.
We're just not interested in because it doesn't motivate us. So it helps us to get those other viewpoints.
Okay, so that brings up another issue, though. If we're going to have all these different people around, sometimes those differences are exactly what causes friction, misunderstanding, disagreements, etc., between people. How can using the information, the motivation map that you do, help to mitigate those kinds of things, maybe even eliminate a lot of that?
That's what I find is really powerful, when we know what's important to each of us and we have kind of a neutral language to talk about it, instead of you're doing this or you're doing that. We have that detachment from it. And when I worked corporately, my friend wasn't really high. I didn't need the friendships at work to keep me going. I was more about other things, and I needed my lunchtime for exercise because I was teaching on the side. and I felt I was getting pulled by people and they were a bit needy. And I had to reframe that to realize, no, that's just what's important to them. So I wasn't taking it personally then. And I could see what they needed. And I could see they are lower on that scale of information needs. So they need more information. Whereas someone who's more high growth, it's like, give me the bottom line. You know, if there's a sales page, we're the ones that go to the bottom line. How much is it going to cost? Whereas someone who has the more relationship oriented area, it's like they'll read everything and want to hear all the testimonials. So by understanding how we can use the language and communication in a way that everyone's needs gets met, then we don't take it so personal.
That brings up the other aspect. A lot of ministry is about communicating, and it's within the organization, but also beyond the organization. For most faith communities, they want to get their message out, or at least have others know about who they are to come and see them. And that what you just said about a typical sales page for something online, each person on this motivational map is going to have different places they key into on what that is. And so it's helpful to know that as like a faith community puts up a website or puts out a newsletter to their members, how to frame some of the things that they're doing that will be more attractive to more people. Would that be something that this map would?
Absolutely. Yeah, I could see that. Like we have the three clusters. So we have the relationship related motivations, the achievement, and then the growth. So for each of those areas, there could be like a short form and then read here, go here to read more, for example, or, something about how the connection is made in the community to satisfy those. And the others that are talking more about, just think about how much you'll expand and really, be more of yourself, or whatever it is that more connected to something for themselves.
Yeah, I hadn't, that kind of a connection hadn't dawned on me until you were talking about the sales page thing. And that could be really useful if somebody got into, because half of ministry is marketing. We don't usually talk about it that way, but at least I never grew up hearing that kind of language when I was going through my seminary training. But it's putting the message out there in a way that people can and are more likely to consume it and to be interested by it. So it's really interesting that this motivational map material can help people. What about within families and within, like raising your children, or with typical parenting issues? How can this maybe help in more of the interpersonal family relationship dynamics?
Yeah, between couples, it's really helpful because to understand those kind of things. So, for example, if you're high growth and make those quick decisions, you might not always be making the best decisions for everyone involved, because you're just, yeah, that sounds exciting, right? The shiny object syndrome. And so I go and spend money. Maybe it's the money that we don't have. So that causes conflict, because we know that money is one of the top issues in relationships. And so if the other partner has that kind of more balance, then we can use them as a sounding board. Or maybe you come up with some ways of coming up with a criteria list. So it's like, this is what we decided as a family. So you have the communication once you know what each other's style is and what's important to them, and how can we take care of both of those things. So if I have more the defender, I want that security. And so how can we make sure that that security is in place before we go and spend the money, right? People talk about wanting to go on vacation, but so many people get in trouble financially because they don't have the money for it. So what can we do as a family to work towards that? What are the goals that we can create together? And same with deciding on how we raise the kids. Maybe I'm more of the spirit and like that place where I don't want to have people fence me in, or I'm always seeking to make a difference. So I think that volunteer work, for example, is really important for our kids to do.
Mhm.
Maybe the other partner is like, no, we need to make sure they know how to make money. And so, how can we take both of those things into account along with what the child needs and wants so that we're having a well rounded child and everyone's happy and we're not fighting against what we want the kids to do or how we want to work together as a family?
How is there an age limit as to how young somebody can be to take the motivational map?
There is one for teenagers,
Oh, okay.
which is really helpful if you want to have them look at what's the career path they want to go.
Mhm.
So for the younger kids, not so much, but there's a place where you can do other things. And it's mostly about opening up the communication with them and really being able to have that discussion and bring them in at a young age, right, into the family discussions about things.
Yeah, yeah. Because I could also see that if well, as a teenager, if a teenager went through this, it could be good for communications between parents and teens, for parents to know what the motivations are for their teenager, because that can be a rough age group for many parent teen relationships. Um,
Absolutely.
and so having that kind of information could be a good thing for them as well. Yeah,
Because teenagers are wanting to separate and be independent, and the parents want them to make sure that they're successful. So, yeah, I think it just helps anything we can do to bring in a language that's kind of more neutral and what's important to us.
right, right. So in the little bit of time that we have left is how can people get in touch with you? And we'll put that also on the screen here. But what's one way people can get in touch with you? And what's one little tidbit that you want to leave with us?
You can reach me at alifeofchoice.ca or my email, which is probably easier, Robyn, Robyn, M. Actually, I'll do Robyn at alifeofchoice.ca.
And
And the one
CA,
tidbit,
yeah,
sorry,
CA stands for Canada. So just so people know.
yes, I usually remind people of that because they go to do.com and
Yeah,
it's like, doesn't go anywhere or to the wrong place.
right.
And I would say the tidbit is really step back and what can I do to be more detached? That I'm not taking something personally from the other person, that I can actually take a breath, relax, and actually listen to what they're saying without wanting to defend myself or to come back or figure out what I'm going to come back with. So, really starting with that listening, and you can start to see what's important in them just by what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's even if somebody doesn't take the motivational map, which I've done with you, and it was very interesting and helpful little, not little, but exercise there. But to what you just said, to listen without taking something personally, that listen and say, this is what the speaker is feeling, this is what they are thinking, and I don't have to agree with that, and that's okay. You know, it reflects on them, not on me. And you know, maybe I want it to reflect on me at times, and other times I don't want it to. If it's a compliment, yeah, that's always a nice thing. But thank you, Robyn, for being here, for helping us understand some other ways that we can share a little bit of God's love through who we are and how we are, and in our relationships, in ministry, and even in our families and in our communities. So Thank you again, and it's been a pleasure having you here. God's blessings to you.
Thank you so much.